Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 558th episode of Constructed Criticism. I'm your host, Mason, joined by nobody this week. Spencer and Abe are both out. Spencer has some real-life stuff going on with being a parent and moving and all that. Abe has some work stuff going on that sort of made it so he wasn't going to be able to record the episode this week, and that left us in a little bit of a predicament, especially after last week where we sort of had a lot of stuff going on as well, pre-RC. Abe and I sort of did the 5-minute power hour, right? We get a little quick episode talking about what we think you should play and sort of saying we'll be back next week. And I didn't really want to skip another week, so I actually reached out to a guest that I've been trying to get for a while now. But unfortunately, they were incredibly selfish and didn't drop everything to come do the episode with y'all this week. So that led me to an interesting thing. Do I come in here, say this, say, hey, I'm sorry we're not having an episode this week as well? Deal with it. We'll be back later. We've been doing this a long time. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. But instead, it actually reminded me of something I had brought up in our episode idea section. So behind the scenes, Abe, Spencer, and I, we have a Discord where we put ideas for the show, whether that's like things to work on, things to keep doing, and also main topic ideas. And a main topic idea actually had come up to me this past weekend was sort of doing an episode on the 3 things that I hear a lot in coaching that I didn't expect when I started. Now, part of the original idea for this was going to be one to have me sort of pose these things to Abe and Spencer. You all get their opinions on it, and then I'd sort of tell you what I've been thinking a lot in coaching, what I've been talking to people about. Obviously, they're not here today, but I needed something I could talk about for about 15-ish minutes, and we're going to be doing a whole constructive criticism episode, just me today. So let's see how this goes. Maybe this will be your least favorite episode. Maybe it's someone's favorite. Who knows? But we're going to just go over exactly what I talked about there, which is the 3 things that I hear a lot in coaching that I didn't expect when I started. These are 3, I guess, common questions that I never really thought would come up as regularly as they do. And I kind of want to talk with them today, and hopefully maybe you, the listener, will get something out of this, and it will help you long term. So please leave feedback on if you like this style of episode and if this was helpful. And maybe what we'll do is, if people also really like this episode, we'll do a Patreon only version of this where we have Abe and Spencer talk about it, as we do a monthly episode that is just for patrons as well. We'll talk more about that when we get to the Patreon segment of the show. That all being said, let's break down into it, and I guess to give you some context in case you don't really know who I am, this might be your first time listening. Also, we talk about it on the show, but I don't really advertise it that much these days. It's sort of chugging along, and so I don't promote it as much as I used to. But I am a full-time Magic the Gathering coach. That is what I do for work. Every day I basically see a bunch of people and I help them work on things in Magic. So whether that's, fundamentals when it comes to gameplay, whether that's, big picture thinking, how to work on sideboarding, how to build a sideboard, deck selection, all things like that. That is what I do every single day as a job. And I've been doing it now for actually, just over 2 years. I believe I started back in March of 2023. And at the time of this recording, it's the middle of May 2025. So it's hard to believe it's been 2 years. It's been a fun time. And, I've helped lots of people achieve their goals, whether that's making it to the Pro Tour, winning their first RCQ. I coach people at all different ranges. I have some people that are even, making the Pro Tour fairly regularly, and we meet up every now and again for sort of a check-in and to work on a big picture topic. So that's my credentials or whatever. Normally I don't sort of do that sort of thing as we, bring it all in here, but this is a very different episode, so maybe it reaches a different audience. It might even feel more like a YouTube video. Anyways, the first of the 3 questions that I get is, I can't win with, and then insert whatever the best deck is. This is one of the ones that I kind of expected to be a somewhat common coaching thing, but I've been surprised by how much it has come up. And often I think really what breaks down here, with of course the caveat that everyone's different and your own unique circumstances inform why this might be the case. Often I think it's really a lack of fundamentals that are being executed on. And when I say fundamentals, what I mean are things like proper mulliganing, sideboarding, being good at combat. Combat math is something that people typically undervalue that I really have been trying to be putting more of a focus and light on. If you're missing a good attack or an attack that maybe even sets up a good attack on a future turn, that's going to make the game so much harder. What I always like to talk about in coaching is like, have you ever gone over to a match at your local RCQ and you see this like really stalled out board, and it's like, there's 4 minutes on the clock, they're in game 2, it's just like, it's kind of crazy, right? We've all seen a game like that. Not always, but a lot of the time, if we had like a camera can go back and watch that game, we would see that player A, let's say, missed some early attacks or missed some damage or maybe made a bad block or something, and it led to the game sort of stalling out, right? They messed up combat somewhere, and their chance to sort of close the game or take a lead has vanished now. Now, not always the case. There's obviously lots of different reasons this could be the way it is, but it's a very common thing that occurs. And this sort of thing, understanding also your role, and then just sequencing your spells is sort of a big thing too that comes up. Those 5 things I would say are the 5 things that most often are the reason why people are struggling with X deck. Is one of those core foundations, right, is not as solid as it needs to be, and potentially, and often, if I'm being honest, it's multiple of them. I've started comparing it a lot like a house, where there's the 4 walls and then, sort of the foundation that the house sits on. And that would be sort of, attacking and blocking, macro, micro, sideboarding, mulliganing, right? And if your house isn't sturdy, it doesn't matter what you furnish your house with, right? And imagine furnishing your house is a lot like your deck selection. Well, maybe you are playing the quote-unquote best deck. You're doing the Is It Prowess, the Nadu, whatever. So you have, the latest fashion. You have the coolest chair, the best TV, the best sound system. But when the win comes, which is those hard games that you have to really lock in and the fundamentals matter, well, your house starts shaking. It doesn't matter that, you have this awesome reclining chair if your foundation of the house isn't sturdy. We need to invest in those things. And so, well, there are lots of reasons that you maybe struggle with winning the best deck. I typically think it goes back to a core foundation thing. I will give the caveat that sometimes people misevaluate sort of what a deck is trying to do in the games it can kind of play. To give a good example, I think the Is It Prowess deck in Standard isn't great at playing a long, grindy game, but it does actually play like a pretty good, I pushed a bunch of damage on you early, you ran me out of things, and I stock up and activate my talent, and I can play a longer game if you don't have good pressure, right? And some people think oh god, if I haven't killed my opponent with Is It Prowess by turn 4, I'm just going to lose, there's no way I can come back. And misunderstanding that can sometimes be there. I would argue that goes back to the macro skill we talked about in passing a second ago of what is my role in a matchup, and what am I trying to do? But, maybe some people feel differently, so I wanted to give a caveat. Obviously, every person is very unique. I think one of the great parts about coaching compared to the podcast is I get to kind of get into the details with you and talk about what is going on with you and what is unique about you. One of the things that is a detriment of the podcast, I think, is that I have to speak very much in broad strokes. And I have to speak to a lot of you and get the idea across. So I have to lose a bit of nuance in order to really convey something. And I might also have to do something like I just did, where it's like a one-size-fit-all, which I think is sort of a fundamental issue we have with education, and that each person sort of needs some stuff to be tailored. That's a personal opinion, but here we are. So that is typically why I think you can't win with the best deck, is typically there is some core issue that is the problem, and it's showing its head with this deck. And maybe the decks that you're used to playing, you have, a lot more comfortability, a lot more confidence, and you maybe have that fundamental really strong, right? So maybe a good example of this is, if you look at Prowess and Modern, I think I've noticed a lot in coaching recently, is people are trying to sideboard in 7 cards, 8 cards. And, for some modern decks, that's a very normal thing you do. For Prowess, I would argue that if you're kind of going over 4 cards in Modern, you're typically a little bit off. That isn't always the case, but it's a good broad stroke rule of thumb, is that your main game plan is to kill your opponent and not allow them to sort of initiate their game plan, but you don't want to dilute your deck so you can't kill them, right? So you want to have, the Alpine Moon or the, Spell Pierce or some small kind of speed bump while you run them over really quick with your fast proactive draw. So it might be something in that kind of vein. Anyways, this is a long story short of there's a lot of little things it could be, and I would really tell you to go back to basics. Typically the best decks are the best decks for a reason. Sometimes we're wrong about them as a community, but the best deck will often get you a lot of mileage. It'll be very strong. But if we're lacking victories with it, it could just be because of our fundamentals. And so I would really encourage you to go back and look at those. Not always the case. Sometimes there are other things going on. But, that is sort of the broad strokes answer there. The next thing I hear a lot that I was not honestly expecting kind of at all, this one really shocked me, I think, when I first started getting it on the regular, which was, I have already lost, so I'm checking out. And basically the idea behind this one that I can gather from a lot of people is like, listen, I've lost this game, maybe even the match, let's say, right? And I'm sort of just going through the motions, right? And I'm just trying to play my cards, and, if I get super lucky, when they draw 9 lands in a row, maybe I'll win, but I'm like 99% to lose, so I'm just giving up. And I can understand where someone's coming from, right? It could be emotionally very draining. Also, tournament days can be very long, so maybe you're viewing it, and it's something I've heard from people, as like a strategic decision, right? It's like, yeah, it's only round 3. I was 2-0 before. My tournament's not over, so I don't want to expend a lot of mental energy and sort of put myself in a position to be in the worst rounds later, because this round I fought really hard for that 10% victory that was, maybe even closer to 5% for me to really get it. And I understand how we get to those answers and those conclusions. I don't even think they're that absurd. I do sort of think there's a lot going on here, so I'm going to kind of break this one down. But we need to take a step back, kind of like we did the first one, and I think establish something first, and then from there we can have a real conversation. And the thing I always tell people is, if you want to consistently win Magic tournaments, you're going to probably need to win the matches you're quote-unquote supposed to win, right? So imagine your, 60-40 matchups, the ones where you're a big favorite. Those are the matchups where you need to be winning those games. If you're not winning those games, then we're probably going to have a much harder time consistently converting, right? And I like to say that if you're going to win a bigger tournament, or even like, a local RCQ, you probably need to win a matchup you're not supposed to win, right? You basically need to have a game, typically, where you're in a position where things are kind of bad, and you somehow squeak it out. Now, once again, like we look back at the percentage examples I gave, 60-40 is not even that unreasonable to win, right? It's like, yeah, 4 out of 10 games I'm easily expected to win, barring any sort of player skill and agency type, situations going on. And so there is, sometimes people like give me a little pushback there, right? They're like, well, how am I supposed to win the games I'm not supposed to win? And it's like, well, a lot of times it's not as lopsided as we really think it is. And it comes back to this that we were just talking about for this point, right? I have already lost, so I'm checking out. You need to really always stay as plugged in as you can and play with extreme high intensity. I've been talking about this on the Always Improving parts of the podcast, and about how, I was doing that a lot for Magic back in the day, kind of lost it a little when it came to playing online, and rediscovered it playing League of Legends in my free time, and really trying to compete and play as best I can in that game. And that idea of always giving your best, never giving up, trying as hard as you can, is the best thing you can do for your win percentage. Because maybe it is only 10%, but like I said, we need to win a game we're supposed to lose if we're going to consistently be winning tournaments. It's a very common factor. Just ask anyone who's won a lot of tournaments, they'll tell you this exact thing. I got lucky in a couple spots, and I won some games I wasn't supposed to win, if you get down to the details with them, right? Yeah, every now and again, you have the perfect deck for the weekend, and you run over everybody, My first time qualifying for the Pro Tour, I was like one of the only people in the room with Uro in my deck in Standard, and I ran to a bunch of decks early on that were pretty good matchups, and I had like one really kind of tough, but we turned out statistically to be in my favor, as we saw long-term from the data matchup. And that's great, that does happen. I think I'm an example of that happening, but that is not the norm, I don't have a lot of tournaments like that, where things that, are wins that are significant, where I didn't face real adversity. You're going to run into adversity, especially in healthy metagames, right? The healthier the metagame is, the more sort of these bad matchups you have. So you're going to have to give it your all in all these games you need to win. And you'll remember earlier I gave sort of this, I think, kind of cop-out answer that some people give that I think does make a little bit of sense at first glance, right? Well, I'm going through the motions, Mason. I don't want to be tired later, right? And I think at first blush, that's pretty reasonable. However, my pushback becomes a little bit of like, well, we're going into these rounds expecting ourselves to, let's say it's a 8-round tournament with top 8, right? You're expecting to be really tired and push yourself for the 8 rounds, right? And to sort of relax and, reform yourself. Recompose, that's the word I'm looking for. Recompose yourself between the rounds and just give it your all and the most you can. And checking out is not going to help you, right? And I have watched so many games in coaching or in commentary. Like I watch a lot of Magic, everybody. Like, my other thing I do a lot of is I commentate Magic. And I also practice commentary Magic, right? Like, where I will sit down with like a casting partner and we'll like watch and go over these things and try and get better at our craft. And I've just watched a lot of games where it's very clear to me, because, I engage so much with Magic, that player A has checked out. They made a sloppy mistake 2 turns prior that, let's say, put them in a slightly worse position. Maybe they missed a point of damage. And then now the time's come, and maybe they weren't even going to win, but they could have got the game back to even. And instead of being even, they're just slightly behind now instead of, very far behind, because they missed that advantage. And then they still end up losing the game. And it would have been much closer, or even plenty of times I've seen where they would have won. Where it's like, yeah, if you had just, saved your sleight of hand so that you knew you could trigger your cutter when you're both top decking, and try to get there and get more prowess triggers and guarantee chaining off a bit more, then you would have won that game. But instead, you fired off sleight of hand, not thinking about it, thinking, well, I might as well just go for it, when you could just draw a card, wait to see, what that card is. You're not under any pressure. And yeah, you're behind because, your opponent has more life or is maybe, an Omniscience combo deck and time's gone on. But it's like, well, you need to maximize your actual chance of winning, right? And obviously, there's a lot of vague tangibles there we just talked about, right? Like, that might be a little hard to follow. But the core of the idea is give it your all. Don't stop thinking. Really push yourself. And understand, too, that it's normal, and I would argue even good, to be tired at the end of Magic tournaments, right? This is a hobby and a game where we push ourselves and we want that mental challenge. And our brains fundamentally are always trying to sort of take the easy way out and conserve energy, right? Like, that's just a thing that human brains do. So, since they are trying to do that, we need to kind of fight back against it and really push ourselves, right? Now, do everything you can, push yourself, and then relax between the rounds and sort of, let it go. If it's a match you were a huge favorite to lose, then, or things went so terribly, those should be the games that roll off our shoulders. We're not losing sleep over. We lost. We gave it our best. And honestly, if the game is unwinnable and you're giving it your best, there shouldn't be that much to think about. You should just be, screwed. You don't have a way to win. So try your best. Don't give up. Way more games are winnable than you think they are. I cannot undersell how many times I have gone into a VOD review and someone has said something along the lines of like, yeah, game 2 is kind of a non-game, but like game 1 and 3 were really good. I think there's a lot to go over. And we go to game 2 and I'm like, I think you could have won this if you had done like X or Y, or this game would have been way closer or something like that. So give it your all. Really try there. I'm taking a check to look at the time. We're good. I'm on pace. I'm a little slow. That's all right. So this last one is very much, I kind of thought I would get this every now and again, but it has been cropping up more and more recently, especially with a lot of first-time clients, which I think makes a little bit of sense once I say it, that, as time goes on, maybe these people who are dejected have heard from friends or experiences or have heard of other positive coaching experiences that come to me, and I get this question of, I get so unlucky. I don't know that you can help me, but I don't know what else to do. And there's a lot of variations of that statement, right? But basically the core of it is, I just feel helpless. I feel lost. I want to do good at Magic. I don't know what to do. Can you please help me? Right? And and you'll note too that it starts with, I get so unlucky, right? And that is the common through line. They don't all say it like that, but when I get down with these players and these people and I start talking to them, it's, I am unlucky, comma, I don't know what to do, please help. And at the end of the day, if you play a lot of Magic, it should balance out. And that's sometimes really hard to grasp. That, like, if you, let's say, play 5 matches, right? Imagine any local RCQ you've been to. There are, a bunch of different possible outcomes, and they're all fairly likely, right? Like, you could hit any of them, barring skill or whatever, right? Like, I win a couple, I lost a couple, I won all of them, I lost all of them. These are all things that can occur. But Magic is a game of skill. The person who is playing has direct influence over these games to a certain degree, right? A lot of it I like to describe as putting your finger on the scale, right? Your deck selection, your sideboard choices, your mulliganing, our attacks, all of these sort of things, our attacks and blocks, pardon me. These are all things that move the scale, Am I supposed to not play my card here? How do I sequence these? What land do I play? What land do I represent? Do I choose to bluff? Do I choose not to bluff? These are all things that move the scale. And there's a lot of agency. Now, anyone who tells you there isn't luck in Magic is an idiot. There just is some amount of luck. However, it is a thing that is universally flat, Luck is not more on Mason's side and less on Abe's side. You know what I mean? It's not that way. There's a famous quote of like, luck is like hard work and preparation meeting at the right time. And I kind of think that is like more true than not. Basically the idea being like, if you put in good work and you're prepared, when you have a chance to get lucky, you are going to capitalize on that. Very similar actually to our last conversation topic, right? Checking out. If you check out and you don't try, you're going to miss some opportunities potentially. Same idea sort of here. But I don't think any of that really matters. I think there's really this idea of, we don't know where we're actually messing up. We are maybe a little out of touch with where we actually are in Magic. Not always the case. Some of these people are really well attuned with like, hey, I'm not the best in the world, but I'm also... It just feels this way. I don't know what to do. Some of them I think are. I've had some hard conversations with people about like, I've watched your gameplay. I've seen these things. We're not where we are, but we can work on this, and it is something you can improve and learn at if you want to. But at the end of the day, you're not more unlucky than anyone else. You might be having a bad patch. And unlucky patches can happen for long strings of time. And sometimes I think they even start becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy where you feel like you're so unlucky and you feel like this isn't your format, where you feel like this isn't your deck, where you feel like you're having an off season where, I do these sort of things and you don't give it your all. And you start deviating from these rigid structures that we have that are very helpful. If you focus in on your core fundamentals and you have those things rock solid and you play good, tight, clean Magic, you're going to succeed like over a long period of time, right? Like that is going to get you very far. There's a reason players like Simon Nielsen and Javier Dominguez keep doing so well. They have good, strong core fundamentals, and yes, they select good decks and are working with some of the best players in the world. Those are all things that are like theoretically possible for others, some more likely than others, right? Like you could play the same deck as Simon pretty easily, but you might not know all the nuanced details that working with someone like Javier, for example, might have insight into. So it's not a complete one-to-one, but these players, they stick to core good fundamentals, and they are not like, oh, I had such a bad Pro Tour last time, I need to pick a deck this time that is just a Hail Mary deck. Like they are doing good, strong things, right? And they're just playing to the best of their ability. So I get unlucky. I don't know what to do. If that is you, I understand it's really hard. I understand it feels really bad, and I understand it sucks. That being said, I laugh a little because it is this thing where it's like, we need to figure out what do we want from Magic. This is the thing I talk a lot about on the podcast and a ton in coaching, which is there's no wrong way to engage with Magic, right? There's only lying to ourselves about what our true goals are and what we truly want, right? You can play Magic where we play Commander 80% of the time, and when my LGS has an RCQ, I go as hard as I can on that RCQ at my LGS, excuse me. That's a great way to play Magic. That sounds like a lot of fun. You could be someone like me, who a lot of your goals are about improving long term, becoming the best you can be, playing the tournaments that make sense for you, playing local RCQs, playing the RCs. That could be a great goal. Your goal could be literally just to be the best mono white aggro player you can be. That's a fine goal. Your goal could be, I want to just make it to an RC. I want to make it and play, and then figure out what I want to do from there. There are no bad goals listed. None of those things are a wrong way to engage with Magic. However, a wrong way to engage with Magic is, Mason, I would be ecstatic if I top 8'd an RCQ. And you make it to top 8, and you maybe even make it to top 4. And then suddenly you become really toxic with yourself, hopefully not others, but potentially even others, and you become really self-deprecating of like, God, I couldn't win, I couldn't do this. And it's a situation where it's like, well, our goal was to top 8. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? We got our goal. We need to keep sight of that, and we need to work and improve on these things going forward. Anyways, if you're feeling unlucky, I know it's tough. Really think about what I just said there. What are your goals with Magic? What do you want? And understand that there can be months of unluckiness. There might be some core root issue that is actually the problem. Once again, going back to the fundamentals, a lot of this goes back to being really good at that first thing. I ordered these things in a way for a reason. You are not more unlucky than anyone else. I am sorry to say that. Luck is unbiased. It doesn't care who you are, where you are, what's going on with life. It doesn't, you're not owed one because your flight got delayed. You're not owed one because, your, house is, got hit by a tree the night before. It doesn't balance out, in the same way. Just because you, maybe got really lucky in life and recently had a promotion does not mean your Magic tournament's going to go poorly. But I know it can feel sometimes that way. I know it can sometimes feel bad to have these like constant moments be occurring, or what feel like constant moments. Take a step back. Try and, focus on the long term. Think about the totality of your life and the totality of your Magic career. What is that going to be? And remember that, even players like Paulo Vitor Damarosa, widely considered to be one of the best Magic players of all time, had a stretch in the middle of him during a very dominant time where he just sort of, did really poorly. He didn't think he was doing too much too different. He sort of was keeping at things, trying his best to keep us cool, but just had, I think it was a bad year and a half-ish. And he's one of the best players of all time. And some would even say the best player of all time. So, that is all to say, I am sorry, but it's going to be okay. Wow, what an interesting main topic. I hope you all like that. That was definitely something that's unique here to CC. Hopefully that was helpful. One of the things I could even feel when I was talking about those topics is it's a little weird because so often it's much more a conversation I'm having with someone. And while I might kind of have ideas as to what the problem is, I really need to figure it out for each individual person. So, hey, you maybe had some of those problems that you were thinking about, and that maybe didn't feel like it answered it for you. It could be something different. There's a lot of nuance to these sort of things. And like I said before, I think a one-size-fit-all approach when it comes to education, I think is not the greatest idea ever, and isn't going to always be conducive to help. But if this was helpful, I'm really glad. I wish you the best of luck when it comes to Magic and these sort of things. And understand it is a long journey. Magic is one of the hardest, most punishing, and most fun things you can do in your life. You will make some of the best friends ever. You will have moments that sting like nothing else. And it's going to be awesome. And you're going to look back and you're going to smile and be so, so happy. I'm just remembering moments right now as I talk about this that like flashing before my eyes of like, thinking through all the lines, and I have these two lands, both with an ability. It's a Ghost Quarter and a Radiant Fountain. I'm against Affinity, and what's the right play? And I just Dexterity error the wrong one, lose, and now I'm not top-8ing this open. That stings. But then there's also all these great moments of, like hanging out with friends, meeting new people, having these great experiences, having these awesome games, these games that I won, right? It's so much fun. There are a lot of things that can sometimes feel really tough about this game. That can be really heartbreaking, really brutal. But I really encourage you to, try your best and don't worry too much about winning and losing, and just be the best you and the best player you can be. And I promise that if you focus on that, you will have more fun with Magic. That's going to do it for the main topic. We're wanting to always do the always improving segment. This one feels a little weird because it's a segment where normally we chit chat with each other and we talk about something that we've been improving on and, life or Magic in general. And I'm just me, right? It's all me here today. So I guess I'm going to quickly talk about this because I did want this to be like a full CC episode. My always improving moment comes from wanting to really, once again, find it's fun in Magic and think about my goals. And it's like, well, there's a little bit of a downtime now. There's RCQ season going on, but the RCs are, I believe, over after this weekend. I believe the Canadian RCs are the last. Well, the Canadian RC is the last one. I think they're only doing one this time. Maybe I'm misremembering. I know I'm commentating one this weekend. That I know. Either way, it's going to be a little bit of a low time. I'm not going to need to be eyes on top of things. Yes, there's Modern RCQ season, but I typically feel pretty comfortable with Modern. And I wanted to play some Pioneer. Pioneer, quote unquote, officially launched on Arena. And, I also have been trying to draft more and kind of build my collection up on Arena a little bit. And so I decided I wanted to play Pioneer. And I was like, you know what? I think Is It Cutter is a deck that does port to Pioneer. And I've just been tweaking with it and having a lot of fun talking about it some in the CCMTG Patreon Discord with some of y'all. And, it's been great. I love the deck. It's super fun. Imagine Is It Cutter, but you have to play with like Ledger Shredder and Treasure Cruise. But also one of the cool things is, as we, disseminated the deck, other people have taken the deck in different directions where they cut Shredder and maybe add Soulscar Mage, or maybe they cut Shredder and Soulscar Mage slot all together and play more cantrips or more burn spells. So it's just been really fun though to kind of have fun playing, a spiky, competitive minded deck without all the pressures of being the best. And I think so often when we play these tournaments, at least for me, there's a lot of pressure to be the best version of myself or play the best deck. And also to understand what's going on in these formats on a deep level so I can help other people in coaching. But getting just to focus on this deck, I'm having a great time, I'm tweaking cards, I'm trying things out. And I'm sure other people are trying this. I haven't seen a ton of mirrors on the ladder. So I'm sure I'm also providing a unique, but maybe a little bit frustrating for some of the people running away from Standard, experience on the ladder. And it's just been really fun to be like, okay, is it prowess versus, Jun food combo? What matters? What's going on? Okay, earlier this morning I played against the Yorion Enigmatic Incarnation deck. All right, what are my sideboard cards that matter? What do I have going on here? How do I want to play these games? Really figuring out the nuance and the minutia. That's really fun to me. The tweaking's really fun. I'm having a blast. And, as a small aside, the thing I've been most surprised by is the number of Treasure Cruises that are actually in my deck. Currently I have 2. I'm constantly fiddling with the deck, but I started with 4 because I was like, obviously you play 4, and I was lowered to the ground. But as I've gone on more and more, I've lowered the number a little bit, and it's just been really fun. I don't know. It's just been a great time. I've had a blast, and it was a great, always improving moment. I'd, really challenge you that when you're in a moment where you can have a little bit of downtime, to find what you find fun about Magic and really jump into that, whole hog. Whether that's cube, modern, standard, limited, watching YouTube videos, whatever it is, just get into it and enjoy it. That's going to do it for the Always Improving segment. Check out our sponsors in the description, untap.gg, along with Mana Traders. You can check out both of those below. I believe it should be CCMTG 3. Still at the time of this recording, although very soon it should be 4. It's a monthly code that does change. And last but not least, you can support the show by going to patreon.com/CCMTG to become a patron of the show. I have a Patreon question this week. I wanted to tackle this one, especially actually because it ties into our main topic a little bit. So I figured this might be a good one for me to cover, which is, what information do you find useful for coaches to bring to their first meeting with you? So I think this person maybe meant, what information should I bring to my coach? But, I'm going to handle it that way. And if you meant it the other way, my bad. So this is a thing I get actually asked maybe the most after the initial, hey, we're going to meet, blah, 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 is sort of what do I need to bring? And I can only speak to myself. Typically, the way that my first coaching sessions basically always go is I have a introductory first 5 or 10 minutes with you where, we sort of go over your short and long-term goals when it comes to Magic. I talk to you a bit about what you can expect from the coaching process and sort of, what my goals are when it comes to helping you, and sort of, the too long didn't read there is I basically want you to succeed and feel like you no longer need coaching. A big thing that I push is my goal is to get you to a spot where you feel like this is something you no longer need. And maybe in the future, there's some other thing we need to work on. But for now, we saw it, we conquered. You leave, and hopefully you'll have, a friend who maybe gets interested in coaching, and you'll be like, I had a great experience with Mason, and we'll figure out if I'm right for them. That's been my, sort of guiding light, is just trying to help people and get them out the door as quick as I can. While obviously also making sure they learn the thing they have to work on. And that, is something that I think a lot about. So we go over that, and then I ask a couple of introductory questions, sort of getting an idea of where you're at with Magic with a couple of things. We hop into it. I would say the things that I find the most helpful for people to bring are when they have a clear idea on what they need to work on. And so a good example of this might be, I really struggle with sideboarding. It's the number one thing that comes in coaching early on is, there's a lot of things to work on, but sideboarding is something I really struggle with. And that is something that's great. Understanding too, maybe your strengths and your weaknesses is important. And also just in general, coming in there with like ideas of things you want to talk about and questions and things you want to work on. But I do want to give a caveat, because I'm sure some people are listening and they're like, well, I've thought about getting coaching, or maybe I want to do something like this, but I'm not sure, what to answer when it comes to Mason's thing. I'm in that stage where I don't know what I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling a little lost. That's okay. A good coach is supposed to be able to have some conversation with you, sort of figure out where maybe some disconnects are happening, and then work from there, right? That is part of our job, is to help you figure out what you don't know, right? And that is a huge, huge portion of it. And so if you're feeling a little lost, I think even having something like that for the first session of, let's pretend we just had that whole conversation and you say, yeah, Mason, I'm sure there's lots of things I can work on, but honestly, I just don't know what I don't know. And, can we like have a conversation? Like, what are some things, and they should be able to have that sort of conversation with you. No matter who the coach is, they should be able to help there. I guess, to be fair, maybe someone who specializes in something like a specific deck might not be the best at that. I don't really know. I don't coach in that sort of regard. So I think just the average coach, though, and the average person should be able to help you figure that out, and sort of work from there. And I think it's important, too, if you're in that camp, to be brutally honest and brutally open. Some of my favorite clients are people who are just really raw and open, right? And they're just like, yeah, I did awful, or I'm playing terribly, or I'm so bad at sideboarding, and that makes it really easy for me to understand where we're coming from, because there's no mask on. We're trying to puff your chest up, right, and seem tougher or whatever. Remember, our goal as a coach is to help you succeed. I want you to reach your goals. The number one thing that would make me happy is if you message me and you're like, I won an RCQ, or I did the thing that we talked about. That is so great. That is what I love. And that's what I want you to do. And so I want you to succeed. And I don't care if you're good or bad at Magic, I think some people think oh, I don't want to look dumb in front of Mason or whatever. And it's like, dog, you're here to learn. I do League of Legends coaching. And the League of Legends coaching is in a group environment where, they kind of do little 10, 15 minute little segments with us. And, sometimes I'm definitely not the highest ranked person, whatever, but I'm gold. I'm, middle of the pack. So there are some people who are below me, and I'm asking questions that I'm positive some, players who are lower ranked than me just roll their eyes at. But I just don't know. And I don't care that I don't know. I am in this program doing these classes to learn. So why would I be embarrassed about hey, I don't know what Lulu's ult does, or something like that, where, hey, this might sound dumb. You just said something very nonchalant. I don't know what that means, or what is this, right? Ask us that. And that's something I typically really encourage early on is interrupt me if I say something you don't know what I mean. Make sure we're on the same page. Communication is so important to these things. So Yan Monster, I hope that was helpful. Every coach is different. Every person is different. But I think those things would be good. And I really just also encourage people that if you are wanting to do coaching, don't feel like you need to have the perfect VOD or the perfect loss or everything perfectly figured out. You can go in there with a good idea of these sort of things, or, even that honesty of I am so lost, I don't know where to go, and figure it out from there. A thing that people always say is I wanted to bring a VOD where I lost, where I got crushed. And, there's lots of good learnings from that stuff. I have also found that there are so many VODs where when people win, I'll hear something oh, I crushed them in game 2, right? And I watch over game 2 and I'm wow, we missed a bunch of damage, we sequenced our spells wrong, we got super unlucky, but you went 1, 2, 3, 4, your opponent stumbled, they mulled the 6, they played a tap lane on turn 3 in standard, and blah 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 blah, right? And it's just we had things we could have improved and done better. And remember that winning does not mean we played well, and losing does not mean you played poorly. Very important. Thank you all so much for listening to this CCMTG episode. I know it's very different. Wow, we got in under 40 minutes. I was hoping 35, but that's okay. We do that sometimes here. And thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can find me on Blue Sky, the same name. You can reach out to me for coaching via either of those websites, direct messages, or via email, masoneclark@gmail.com. Put coaching in the description. That way I know you're not spam. And you can find me on coverage this weekend for the Canadian RC. I believe that's on Face to Face Games Twitch channel, if I remember correctly. You can follow me on social media, and I'll be tweeting about it if you want to watch some coverage action. It's going to be me and Dom Harvard. It's going to be fun. You can find Spencer at Heezy Games on social media, and then Abe at More No Things if you want to find them, as always. And thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week, hopefully for a normal episode of Constructed Criticism.
Magic, magic, magic.